All right, Luke, shall we kick off?
Sure.
Cool. So guys, welcome to the third Creative Natives webinar, which this morning is an agency owners special with Luke Evans. So Luke is someone I've known about in the industry for a number of years, and I'm delighted to have him here today to talk through how to run an agency during these times. This morning's session, we aim to make it as interactive as possible. So on the chat bar on the Zoom, feel free to shoot through any questions. And look, if we haven't gone through as much detail as you want, yeah, please do give us a shout. Before we start the session, I'm going to ask Luke to quickly introduce himself and a quick top line of what to expect in this morning's session.
Cool. Thanks, Ryan. Really appreciate the opportunity to sort of speak to everyone today, and it's great that you could join. It shows that you're serious about making a positive change in the business, obviously, as a result of COVID-19. Secondly, it sort of has to be said that I'm in awe of independent businesses. You know, it takes a lot of courage to sort of go out on your own, and doing so you know, means that you probably end up with a bit of scar tissue, but hopefully, you know, sessions like this can sort of help you navigate or chart the really complex waters. Thirdly, the impacts of obviously COVID-19. Look, I'm not, you know, going to pretend I know exactly how you feel, even though I'm a sole trader. What I will say is that, you know, again, this session hopefully gives you enough information or thoughts on how to sort of future-proof your business. So, look, a little bit about myself. I started off as studying mechanical engineering. I dropped out of that. Was no good at it. No good at all. But I dropped out of that and got into technology. Started working for a bank in Australia. Then went to London. I was in London working for a SaaS company for a little while, mainly focusing on e-commerce systems. Then worked for Oxfam for a period of time, which is arguably one of the most inspiring roles that I've ever been part of. I led some visual teams there, as well as their development and project management teams. And then I went to the other bookend at the end of my time in London, which was working for Barclays Capital on this $150 million compliance project. And that was only for a few months, but you know, equally rewarding in terms of what they were trying to achieve there. And then I came back to Australia and then worked for DT, or now AKQA. And what I found at DT was that the project management offering in Australia probably wasn't as good as what I'd experienced. So I endeavoured to sort of set up various different processes and governance and so forth to get the organisation to where I think it needed to be to deliver excellent engagements. I then progressed to becoming operations director and then set up as GM the joint venture between Ogilvy and DT, again now AKQA, in Singapore. So I spent 6 months in Singapore. I left Singapore because I think a virus hit, but it was a huge success over in Singapore, partnering with Ogilvy. And then came back to Australia and I sort of wanted to do something very different. And I ended up having two roles on the table, one with Accenture, which is, you know, a small cog in a big machine, or potentially joining a smaller agency of 65 called Loud&Clear, and growing that as COO, growing that to from 65 to 140 in 14 months. And that was a fantastic experience. Did it through basically adopting a squads operating model, which mimicked Spotify's. But essentially what we did there was grow the business from a financial perspective, you know, top line revenue and profit, but also the culture. And that's what I found was probably the most rewarding outcome of what I delivered there was culturally, it was brilliant. And so I left there after we got it acquired after 14 months. I spent a year at Avanade or Accenture. Again, all roads seemed to lead to Accenture, and started to sort of do my own thing, and specifically wanted to sort of spend time looking after my 2-year-old and encourage my wife to sort of pursue her career. And that was in September last year, and here we are now.
Cool. Perfect. All right, Luke. So we'll kick off the questions now, and I'll start off, which I think has been speaking to a lot of clients that have seen clients drop off, work drop off, revenue drop off, and as we are speaking to a number of independents this morning, for the next period post this, should agencies be pitching like crazy for new work? And is there a formula you've worked with in the past that will give agencies an idea of, is this pitch going to work, and what's the success likelihood is going to be that they're going to win that work?
Yeah, look, I think pitching for more work, yes. Different types of work that sort of don't play to the agency's strengths, probably not. I think with respect to the data side of it, at previous organisations, we had a fairly high win rate when it came down to the end part of the sales funnel. We were targeting sort of 30% win rates, and that was really good. But there was multiple reasons why, and I can touch on what those are. But essentially, what you have is obviously different start points within the sales funnel, and I think if you're able to use data, historical data, to inform that, then that's fantastic. Unfortunately, we're in this very bizarre period where we don't actually have historical data. I've seen organisations where they would have a relatively high win rate of say 20%, drop down to 2 or 3% win rates during this period. Mm-hmm. And so, the unpredictability of it causes concern. But it doesn't take away the fact that data is the most important part of this assessment, if you like. Now, I think what data gives you is the opportunity to look at seasonal things, right? What factors can impact businesses seasonally? They might be things like click frenzy or whatever it might be that businesses need to, from an e-commerce perspective, need to ramp up awareness of when their products are going to be on sale or whatever that might be. But you need the data. Okay. If the question is more around how to sell more, well, then, I would sort of typically follow these sorts of points. I mean, I think it's easier to grow existing accounts than it is to go and find net new. They say it's 30% easier to find new clients, grow existing clients as opposed to new. Some businesses out there, prospective clients, are using submission panels and so forth. So if you can get on board with some of those panels and look to apply through there for net new, I'd say, if you've got partners, they might be software partners or vendors. So, for example, Sycor, Adobe, Google, whatever that might be, Amazon. Trying to get them front and center in front of your brand. And what does that mean? Well, I think a lot of organisations, certainly when I was at Loud&Clear, we had a great relationship with Sycor, and a lot of our business, a large portion of our business had come through them because they liked how we worked with them. We didn't treat them like a vendor. We treated them like a genuine partner, and I think that's really important. And I think another partnership could be complementary businesses. So what are the businesses that you actually can partner with to potentially win a piece of work? Again, I think some of the methods like, increasing retainers is really important. Landing and expanding is a really big thing. So don't try and go for the largest slice of the pie, go for a portion of the slice of the pie, get in, influence through great relationships. And obviously, as they say, from little things, big things can grow. Avoid RFPs if you can. Again, an organisation that I've been working with won a piece of work over a large consultancy because we were able to get in there and avoid the RFP, because if we went head to head with that organisation, we would lose 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
So sure. Make it easier to do business. I think agencies are very good at making business and to do business really easily. The ability to turn things around really quickly is really important.
Yeah.
I think move away from price engagements or agreements, try and go for as many time materials as you can get. I don't know exactly how that's going to play out in the COVID world. I think organisations would want to probably see organisations commit, or businesses or agencies to commit. And I think the last point I'll make is, and it's one that a lot of organisations don't really think about, is as owners of agencies or consultancies, or whatever that might be, independents, you're typically charismatic people. You're great at your job. You've come up with an idea and you've gone and sold it time and time again. But now you're growing your business. I've seen many agencies default to the person who is great at their job, go back into solving project problems. So essentially what they are doing is diluting their value. And if they're not out there selling, or if they're out there solving project problems, they're certainly not out there selling. And I think that is one of the shortfalls of where agencies can go wrong.
Sure. And you touched on it just a second ago about agencies or businesses partnering with other businesses to almost come together as a force, and you see it with WPP bringing collection of agencies together. For agency owners at the moment, how would you suggest they go about partnering with these businesses? Because I would imagine that there's a fair amount of protection over IP, or there's maybe a conflict of interest. Is this a time for businesses to reach out and say, look, this isn't my strength. How about we work together and tackle this together?
Consultancy, right? Consultancy might be hired to do lead a replatforming project, for example. Now, that consultancy won't have the chops to do PR or brand or social or anything like that, and probably much less digital. Those consultancies might be in there just to purely run the engagement. So find some of those consultancies, partner with them, and say, well, we're not going to ever run the $10 million transformation project, certainly not in the short term. I think right now, what we would like to do is get a slice of the pie in terms of those services that I just mentioned before, and do a really good job of them. So find out those consultancies that are running the large, government transformation pieces, and see if you can get in that way.
Yeah. And would you, in terms of your experience, have like, as a practical, and you might not have the answer, but is there a process that you would, if you're an independent, like, how would you approach these businesses? Is it a case of just picking up the phone and saying, this is my agency, can we partner and do that? Or is there a bit more of a formal method?
No, I think leverage as many relationships that you've got. So everyone knows someone in Melbourne or Sydney or whatever it might be that is working for one of these consultancies, for example, and getting in there. And as I said before, don't treat them like like they're another vendor, if you like. Treat them like they are a potential client, because essentially what you might be doing is subcontracting to them. And so they'll be paying your bills to some extent. So treat them like that they are a potential customer.
Yeah.
And go hard for the business through them.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, cool. Second question, and I've seen this through my experience as a recruiter looking into the industry, and there's been a lot of traditional creative advertising agencies who have, for one reason or not, decided to go down the pure digital route. And I've seen problems and of hiring the right people, keeping them, and stuff like that. Is there a process to decide whether digital is the right path for you to go down as a business? And should you hire a third party to come in and evaluate your capabilities before going down that digital route, do you think?
Yeah, look, it's a hard question to answer, because it's obviously there's a lot of growth in digital. I think for the first time, in 2019, digital marketing overtook traditional marketing in terms of volume. So digital is obviously a very good way or a growth area, but I think with growth areas become a lot of other players in the market. There's literally hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of agencies in Australia. So the question is, if you're going to go down that path, you obviously have to come up with a strategy on how you're going to differentiate yourself. Now, differentiation is a really hard thing to do, right? Because a lot of organisations or agencies will claim that they have differentiation, right? Our people are our point of difference in the market. Well, that they might be really great people, but actually, if you ask that to another agency, they'll say also their people are their point of difference. There might be some truth in that, I guess, but ultimately, I think the skills in agencies are roughly the same. I think it's about the offering, and not just the offering, but actually how you execute that work. So what is a really good model that people can use? And I've talked about before about how we implemented squads at Loud&Clear, and that was a really interesting model that a lot of organisations aligned to, because that's exactly how they wanted to operate. But I think maybe you're better off asking the questions around what is the exact area of digital marketing that's of growth, right? You've got thousands of platforms out there now. MarTech is, the landscape for MarTech is huge. The ecosystem is massive. And is there a technology that's not yet hit Australia? Epsilon, for example, not one. It's rated really high on Gartner and Forrester's Magic Quadrants. They haven't hit Australia yet. What if you reached out to them and partnered with them and added that as a part of the offering? I think that could be a really good point of difference.
And that was Epsilon, was it that?
Epsilon, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, cool. Next question is around that. A lot of agencies have had to cut budgets, and there's still the expectation to deliver decent level of work in a timely fashion. Do you have any tips around, I guess, cutting the cost of production and making the work you do more cost efficient and more profitable for an agency?
Yeah, look, I think this is what I've sort of specialised in over the few years. And look, I think it's not just how do you deliver projects more efficiently, but how can you look at the overall operational costs of an agency, right? So from traffic and payroll and finance, and some of those are commoditized services that you can have another organisation deliver at a lower cost. And I think that's a really important thing to look at. Now, if you can do more with less people, obviously, leaner teams, it's obviously beneficial, and no one would probably deny that. But you have to have the trust in your team to deliver on those promises. And so what does that look like? Well, I think you need to give them autonomy and make it more around the destination. So what I'm expecting from this project is, say, 25% profit, for example. And how you get there is entirely up to you. But if you created a multidisciplinary team and put the onus on them to come up with innovative ways to deliver against that target, then I think what you'll find is most people will rise to the challenge. Others, I think agencies are probably a little bit guilty of management or a middle management layer prescribing how you should deliver a project. Well, what if we actually put the onus on individuals to come up with an idea on how to deliver those projects? I think will ultimately mean that projects get delivered more on time and probably do get delivered in a much leaner team.
Sure.
I think the other point is offshoring doesn't always work. I mean, it's a false economy to always offshore. And I think if you needed scale, offshoring's okay. If you needed, certainly in the development world, it's hard, it's complex. You've got to really prescribe requirements down to a real finite amount to get value. But I think, if you were to look into offshore, then go with trusted partners. And I've known a couple, and they can deliver. And I've also had some bad experiences when I was doing work for eBay, and that was really, really hard and complex because culturally, some offshore teams are just different on how they deliver, and that's okay. You just got to know the gotchas. But yeah, they're the things that I would look at.
Sure, and I guess there could be some people thinking that cutting costs means working people longer hours, and what does the reality of that look like? Is it possible to keep a nice high performing culture that people want to go to whilst still being, you know, effective?
Yeah, look, I think lean teams and lean processes are the way forward, right? So where you've got organizations that have lots of governance and they make it more complex to do business, I think agencies have a unique ability to create really lean operating models or delivery models, if you like. And so that doesn't mean to say you have no processes, but you certainly don't want to go the other end of the spectrum and have too many. So I think if you create lean processes, essentially you're getting more speed to market. If you use really good tools that are able to surface data real time, that gives you the opportunity to not just look in the past around actuals like, oh, wow, our project is off track. What if we actually created data that said, actually, if we keep going the way that we're going, these sprints or this waterfall project or whatever it might be, in 2 months' time, we've run out of budget and we've now got 6 months worth of effort left on this project. Those tools and that surfacing that data real time is vital to get ahead and essentially mitigate risk.
Sure. And in terms of, as we said, a lot of the listeners today are from independent agencies, and the competition is, networked agencies, consultancies, in-house teams. How should agencies compete with consultancies? I know it's a topic that we've talked about for probably the last 2 to 3 years, and I think consultancies maybe do a better job than agencies at establishing a price point. Do agencies need to go down that route of consultancies, or how do they need to price themselves, do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Ask yourself from a consultancy perspective, who are they dealing with, right? And I think you'll find that most consultancies, be it all the way from Accentures of 500,000 people, and therefore, and they before COVID-19 were looking to triple that to 1.5 million people in 4 or 5 years. So you look at that and you go, who do they deal with? All the way down to, say, a small boutique consultancy of, say, 10 people. They always deal with the person who holds the purse strings or a C-suite person.
Sure.
And they can charge the $5,000 a day for an individual because the C-suite person has typically got to their position because they understand value. And so if agencies can push harder towards getting in with a C-suite person, be that, a CMO or a CEO, or, the chief digital officer, then I think they can build a relationship where those C-suite people who hold the purse strings can see value. And if you're able to demonstrate value through price or speed or quality or relevance, then I think you'll find that more often than not, that you'll be able to compete from a price perspective or a dollar perspective than not. I think there are certain ways that you could actually beat consultancies at the game, which is, create commercial models that consultancies find too risky to go for, right? So what does that look like? It might be that, hey, our blended rate or our project rate might be $150 an hour, but typically it's, $200 an hour. So we've reduced it by 25%. But if we are able to shift the needle in terms of NPS or, basket size or whatever it might be, then we want some sort of bonus. And I think certainly in this environment, some organizations might go for that sort of game. Now, what does that mean? It means that you've got now more skin in the game. You've now inherited more risk, but I think that's a good way of trying to get ahead of those consultancies.
Sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. I'm just going to pick up a question that we've got from one of the listeners. Just talking around that squad model, and I know that this could be a whole topic in itself, but I guess top line and in an elevator stuff, what does that actually mean to agencies, and what would that look like if someone wanted to implement that model into their agency?
Yeah, sure. So again, when I joined Loud&Clear as COO, I looked at the business and said, look, every agency is roughly the same, right? You have an MD or CEO, and you have some operational people off to the side, and then you have certainly more, the larger agencies have a fatter middle management layer, and then you have people who work. And what I found was the split between, those who are actually billable and providing value was about 50%, and those who weren't billable, which is the top end of town, who are adding the most cost, was 50%. It's like, how can we actually create a different model? And what I come up with was, okay, let's take the agency, divide it into smaller, essentially agencies, and give people the 4 things that we care about. One is top line revenue, profit, NPS of clients, and essentially NPS of staff. So the health and well-being of our staff. And they're the only 4 things I care about. And I aligned those individuals or those squads by vertical. So it might be utilities or financial services or whatever it might be, and said, these are the goals. Here's your team. Now go off and execute that. And so what you ended up doing is creating multidisciplinary teams who are accountable to the outcome, because now they're all going to have to get around each other to deliver on those goals. The other parts that we create was actually self-contained teams, so that they weren't having to go back to the resource pool all the time to find out. Rebecca, who was a fantastic visual designer, she's no longer available. She's gone off on another project, so we've lost that IP. Now we're going to have to go back to the start. And what we also created was a breakdown of silos between the typical, life cycle of say a transformation project, which was, sales, hand it to requirements gathering, hand to visual designers and creatives hand it to developers, and developers hand it to QA, and then all of a sudden DevOps have got their hands on it. We broke down those, and we actually created a cultures within a culture, if you like. So I hope that describes it, but there's a lot more behind it, obviously.
Sure. And you mentioned about resourcing, and at this moment in time, I'm sure a lot of agencies are thinking, geez, we're lucky to keep our team as it is. How did you at Loud&Clear and keep that flow of talent, and how does, from a leader's perspective, would you be saying to people that they should always be constantly meeting good people, or how do they manage the need of project-based requirements?
Is this like hiring you're referring to?
Yeah. I mean, if these projects get the green light, at what point do you meet people, and how do you keep that flow of talent going?
Look, I'm a big believer in meet as much talent as possible. If nothing else, they'll tell you about what's, who's moving in the market and so forth. So I love meeting talent. I never used to. Certainly, 2 years ago, working with various agency partners, such as Creative Natives, I probably put work of trying to prevent and risk mitigate rather than actually going out to speak to really good talent. So I think meeting with them as much as possible. But I think to create a high performing culture, you've got to ask yourself what does a high performing culture look like, right? And I think high performing cultures, probably the most overtly high performing culture from any organization in the world from a technology standpoint is probably AWS or Amazon, right? Mm-hmm. And they've got these 14 leadership principles, and they really enforce them. They live and breathe them every day. But I think, to answer the question of what is a high performing culture, certainly from my perspective, it's one where I think you've got to hire people who have an absolute desire to be successful. I've hired people who are apathetic to success in the past, and it's probably a bad hire. We also hire people who have a desire to be autonomous and accountable. Accountability, again, certainly in some of the larger network agencies, you can hide pretty well in an agency of 100 people and not necessarily be seen. So accountability is vital. And I think those who trust first and doubt second are are vital. I think, I heard the other day that trust is something that you should lose, not actually have to gain. So it's a really important thing. I think the other thing is it's an unfortunate reality of our world is that, you provide financial incentives. So be that, and it doesn't have to be much, it could be $100 vouchers, it could be all the way through to slices of net profit, for example. But I think what that does is it encourages performance, and it does help with retention.
Sure. So you would say to smaller businesses, if there is an opportunity to offer skin in the game to employees, you think that longer term they'll see the return on investment?
Yep, I absolutely agree with that. Yep, and it shouldn't just be about that. But for some people it is. It's a real motivator, and others, I think, want to work with really good people. And I think if you're providing financial incentives, it doesn't have to be much, just enough to show a level of appreciation for delivering results. And I think it's good. And I think that's the reality of the world that we live in. But yeah.
Sure. We've got one question here which talks around the squad model, and that I guess the question is, where there's a bit of culture clash or there's a difference of opinions, which obviously high performing teams, you can't expect everyone to be on that same page. How would you resolve those issues, do you think? And has there been examples where you've gone, bringing a team back on track?
Yeah, look, I mean, it depends on the nature of the debate, if you like. There were debates within squads. There were debates between squads. There were debates outside of squads. I think what debate does show is obviously an intent to be successful. I think you can't create a structure, an operating model that creates a perverse nature, right? So, hey, now that I own my squad, I'm now going to do everything I can to make it a success because maybe I'm financially incentivized or whatever it might be, and go, to hell with the rest of the squads. It can't be that way. So how do you solve debates? Well, certainly within a squad, you say, as a part of being autonomous and as part of having trust and giving you control, you have to solve your own problems. We are, as an organisation, trusting that you're going to do that. If there were times where squads would debate between each other or not agree, I'd ask them to go back to the drawing board and come up with a solution. And I found 9 times out of 10, most squads come up with their own solution to solving problems. And they're typically around resourcing problems, right?
Yeah.
The other 10%, I would make a line call. And that line call would be associated to, if it was a resourcing issue or a resourcing debate, then I would say, how is this going to address the strategic goals of the business? Which option is going to address the strategic goals of the business? And I would choose based on that.
Okay, cool. Got another question, and this one comes around with everyone now working remotely, and there's a very scattered culture, I guess. Do you have any tips on how to make cultures hum remotely, and would if you're running an agency at the moment, how you would make sure that is it check-ins, how do you build culture from afar?
I think to answer that, I mean, there's a lot of talk around, like, I think for every article that I see around, remote working is the new way forward, and you see another article that says remote working won't work. And I think the truth lies somewhere in between. Human beings require human interaction. That's just our makeup. And I see interaction, meaningful interaction, face-to-face interaction. There is some talk about, say, for example, if you had a squad, you may instead of having everyone sort of gravitating towards one office location, you may end up having sort of satellite type offices, whereby, let's just use Melbourne, for example. You might have a squad that hires a small office out the east where people can get to relatively easy. And so you've created a culture within that squad. Hopefully that's inherited some of the culture from the overall organisation. And there's a way that you can actually keep people together face to face, rather than actually having everyone working in the one location. I think Zoom calls and so forth like that absolutely work for some. Certainly from a project management position or a sales perspective, if you can't get people face to face, you want to be able to do things over Zoom. You got others like, and I don't want to typecast developers, but there are some developers who are a little bit more recluse or
introvert.
Yeah, introvert. They might love the fact that they get to work from home and they've got their 6 monitors set up and their big desk and, they're just punching out code. And I think that works well for some and not others. But I would consider looking at some sort of satellite office. I think that could be an option. And if nothing else, you'll probably get some far lower cost commercial real estate out there than others certainly now.
Yeah, cool. And I've got one here, just I guess around identifying specific needs. And from your perspective of managing people, are there key signals that you look for in terms of providing autonomy or getting the best out of people based on their personality? Like how you mentioned about developers being quite introvert. Is there a formula working with that type of person versus a more extrovert person, or is it very individual based?
It's completely individual based, in my opinion, right? So I think a lot of organisations, workplace experience and employee experience is a fairly hot topic. Certainly before COVID, certainly now, and during and well after. Neurodiversity is something that organisations need to take seriously. What is neurodiversity? Essentially, it is treating everyone individually who have their own needs. So some people, as I said, some people are introverts, other people are extroverts. You can't say that all developers are introverts, therefore you're happy for letting them work from home. Nor can you say that all salespeople are always extroverted. I think you need to treat people individually, and I think what you'll get out of that is a far better team. Some people that I've managed don't want to have one-to-ones, and so I give them the option of not having one-to-ones. We'll have check-ins. If there's something wrong, we'll talk about it. But otherwise, we'll leave you alone. I think that's an okay way of dealing with people. You have to do it on an individual basis.
Yeah, sure. This is a question that I've thought of earlier, and there's people here that are running 1-2 person agencies and talking around that sort of business development piece. Should the days of picking up a phone and making a cold call to a business, do you think that works, or should these businesses have case studies or examples of capabilities of work that they can send over to kind of get their sort of foot in the door to try and win that new business?
Look, I think short of coming up with any great statistics, I think it all works. Some might work better than others, but for me, it all works. I think here's an example of where I think you can get greater cut through. If you're doing a project, okay, and that project gets completed and you have some great results, the old way is write a nice 6-page white paper or whatever it might be, and use that as a great case study that you can put on your website and or a blog or whatever it might be, and then as an opportunity to win new business. Like, who's got time to read a 6-page white paper? And quite frankly, like, a lot of people just won't do it. What I have encouraged in the past of my project teams is actually create almost a diary throughout the life cycle of the project. So that might be, in a room having some interviews with clients, and that might be interviews with project people and showing some sort of level of vulnerability. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's like, geez, this project's hard, or hey, I really worked hard on this deliverable and it sort of missed the mark, and so I went back and I'm gonna give it another crack. And doing these little snippets, you might come up with an hour's worth of video content over the course of a life cycle of a project, maybe even more, right? If you can shorten it down to say 120 seconds, 180 seconds, and then shoot that round, people will see that this company is made up of individuals who can show vulnerability, who get a result, who actually have clients on the video themselves. speaking, the kudos to that business. I think that's a different way of doing it. I think it's a much better way than shooting off a 6-page white paper.
So rather than the polished, finished article showing the mistakes and learnings you made away and the emotion. Yeah.
Yeah, like, show people doing card sorting in a workshop. Show, the teams doing a stand-up. Show that there's, and it doesn't, as you say, it doesn't have to be super, super polished. Have some nice branding on it, and send it out, and people will be able to watch 2 minutes of content more than they will be able to read that 6 pages.
Cool. And with everyone post-COVID, there's talks around people working 2-3 days a week in the office, so on and so forth. Other than Slack, are there any technologies, anything that you have used that has enabled teams to use technology to your advantage?
Yeah, look, I'm from a communication perspective. I think you'll find that all the tools exist out there. Whether it's Jira, Confluence, Slack, Teams, those types of tools, Zoom. I think I don't think you should reinvent the wheel with those to some extent. There are some tools out there that help with productivity. They might be things like Agile or Scrum bots that actually help and coach you through a Scrum or a sprint. So I might talk about, hey, your velocity is compromised. You've got 3 days to go on your sprint. Here's some really cool things that you could do to increase velocity. But I think the tools that will ultimately make a difference is if you've got finance tools and you've got tools that measure or time-sheeting tools that do actuals. You've then got forecasting tools around effort, and all these tools all these tools in a vacuum, they do their job, but there's no way of analysing. And one of the things that I've done in the past is set up data aggregators that you can look at the project forecasted health. You can look at it's in the past. You can look at utilization, and I'm not talking about just are people busy, but actually are people busy and are they on billable work? And I think surfacing this information up gives you the opportunity to make decisions that are far more relevant and far more real time than most other organizations. And that includes enterprise organizations like an Accenture or whatever, or Deloitte. They don't have these tools. They have teams that look at this data, but they don't actually have the tools.
Sure. I think as work begins to ramp up, there's probably going to be more of a need to hire contractors. And I know you in the past would have used many contractors. Is there, and there might be from an ownership, I've heard many owners say, look, we don't like contractors because we like people being part of the culture. Is there a way to quickly make contractors be part of that culture, do you think?
Yeah, look, I think the first thing I will say to those who probably don't love having contractors on, what I've typically done in the past around contractors is essentially 20% of the agencies that I've essentially led or run have had a portion of contractors. That might be 20%, okay? And that's typically the number that I've gone with in the past. Because at any point in time, a project might stop, might be cancelled, and a client you might lose an RFP, therefore client might leave you, or God forbid, we have a pandemic. And then I think being able to offload 20% of your cost in the business, because typically the staff cost is the highest cost in any agency, being able to offload that pretty quickly is, I think, really, really vital, to the health of everyone else, of the other 80% in your business. In terms of making them feel like they're part of the culture, I think what I've been able to do by way of, for example, this squads model was a lot of contractors, and there's one in particular I'll talk to. He was one of 3 or 4 enterprise solution architects for Sitecore Commerce in the world. He came on as a contractor, and within 3 months, we were able to get him on board as a perm because he loved the culture that much, because he got given the right to be able to make decisions. He was given the trust or the autonomy to make decisions. I think if you give that, there's a huge upside of benefits.
Yeah, perfect. Cool. Okay. Luke, we're sort of getting close to the end of the session. I think we've got about 10 minutes. So if anyone does have any questions, do shoot them through. But I guess, you know, you've seen the guest list. We've got a lot of independent owners. What if you had to sort of say a couple of pieces of advice for the next few months to get through this and to come out of it the other side? What would you say to them? And what would be your takeaways for this?
Look, I think the big things are, how can you create an operating model that is different from every other organisation that sits out there, any other professional services organisation out there, and use that as a staff retention piece, use it as a staff acquisition piece, use it as a new business acquisition piece, to the right people in at the right time, clients in that you need to. I think, you know, we're in 2020, 30 to 40% of people won't be either in their existing role because that role doesn't exist anymore, or conversely, they'll have to significantly skill in some other area. So if you want to talk about future-proofing your business, well, let's talk about things like, technologies or where the world's moving to. That might be cloud migrations. You know, do you want to be known as the agency that specializes in cloud migrations into AWS or Google or Azure for Microsoft? Those types of decisions, you know, use this time now to pivot if you need to becoming a more robust business for the future and more viable one. And I think, you know, the other thing is, you know, just giving people, as I said before, the trust and autonomy, but giving them boundaries to work within, make them feel like they've got a say in how the project is executed or the business is run, and they'll be loyal for sure.
Sure, perfect, cool. Well, look, as I say, Luke, if anyone listening today does want to reach out to you or pick your brain or go through anything, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. So hit me up on LinkedIn, or I've got a email address. I haven't necessarily registered a business, which I probably should do, but essentially, or registered a domain rather. Look, it's lukeandrewevans1@gmail.com. Currently, I'm helping a few businesses at the moment. We're seeing some really good results. Some of those are agencies, some of those are client side businesses, develop better products but overall, like, there's a commonality between these businesses, and it's typically around getting the right data in the business. How can you surface data in a much more proficient way, and how you make decisions off of that data? That's the analytics side of data analytics. I guess look at what I've done is look at cultures. How can we create high performing cultures in the business? Now, I'm not a culture coach as such, but I think I don't put big butcher paper up on the wall and come up with inspiring goals or whatever it might, philosophies, but I'm a person of results. So what we do is we test and learn. We try something, we build on it, and we keep going forward. And that's what I've seen businesses, go from very low margins to very high margins in a very short period of time. I've seen businesses go from compromised cultures and infighting, for want of a better word, to collaborative businesses, not just even within that business, but also with all their partners as well.
Great. And look, from my perspective as well, the intention of these meetings and whatnot are to connect agency owners and businesses, and if we can you know, create partnerships and whatnot, then I think that's all for the greater good, because you know, the competition is tough, and I think independents, we all kind of need to club together and work together instead of seeing each other as just complete direct competitors.
Look, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Ryan. You know, I'd rather have a smaller slice of a big pie than a big slice of a really small pie. So, and I like pies. So, so look, I think, you know, you're absolutely right. But also, you know, companies like yours, you know, partnering with companies like yourselves, Creative Natives, really help businesses scale and take a lot of that legwork out of having to find the right person at the right time. Yeah, there's a lot said for partnering with the right business to do a lot of that stuff, and I think you'll see a lot of positive results, you know, in terms of the culture and how your business performs overall.
Perfect. All right. Well, look, we'll wrap up today. But again, thank you so much, Luke, for getting involved today. And I've taken so much from it. And look, thank you for everyone who's tuned in. And like I say, feel free to shoot a message to Luke or myself with any further questions. And yeah, you guys have a great weekend. Okay. Cheers.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Bye.